Australia, I'd imagine elsewhere around the world as well. At least it should.
Mm-hmm. And what do you mean by disruptive? What do you mean by disruptive sector? Sorry.
So the sector is currently going through a lot of change, and that change, a lot of that is reactive. So it's not something that's been programmed, hasn't been planned by the departments of education. It's been brought on by things like COVID. Has certainly caused a lot of shifts, and that creates a reactive response, which from a design perspective is probably not always the best response, I would think. So yeah, and I think we've got a lot of catching up to do, to be honest, and I think
Is this the education sector we're talking about? Kindergarten, or we're talking about high school or primary school?
Yes, it really is. A lot of it transcends a lot of the boundaries of whether it's from kindergarten through to tertiary. A lot of the issues in terms of designing the spaces which support the learning are very much the same. I suppose one of my I base a lot of my work around the Thornburg examples of campfires in cyberspace, and that idea that in many ways we have remained tribal, humanity, and as much as we try and funk up things in our design and technology, we still relate to each other in a very tribal way, and that's how we naturally learn. And so how do we do that within this this now transmediatic or metaverse type world that we're now being all introduced to? So that's really the work. So a lot of it that comes down to the ability to, if the designer relies on the user to inform them. So that's that issue of empathy. Right? But if the user doesn't actually know what they need, how can they inform the designer to design it? I think that's a simple question.
Yeah, I think that's a very complex topic you have selected, and I think it will be really interesting to maybe bring you in at some point, Andrew. Once you are kind of maybe halfway through your PhD, it will be really interesting and you have maybe a publication out of it. It would be really nice to get you in to discuss this, because I think it's I think that is a very topic, all around the world, which is quite important. And, for example, in US, you can become a teacher now with no teaching qualification, at primary or high school.
Fantastic.
So, it's
scary.
Yeah, well, because they have they don't have a sufficient number of teachers. They have a shortage. So they decided that you can become a teacher with no qualification at all, which is, it is scary. But it just tells you
There's
about.
There's also an opportunity.
Well, it is and it is not, because it's if you are from low economic class, you have no choice. You send your children where you send them. So And I guess what this is where private education brings about. It's about separations. People who have resources send their kids into educations, where the well-qualified teachers, and the rest, they have no choice. So these are kind of so besides being reactive, it's also about the structures of the education system.
Yes, so, that's correct. And
so maybe that might be a good thing to look at also. It's about the structural, economical, and political issues.
I think so. I don't know. Certainly in Australia, I imagine it must be the same in the USA then, that the teachers are copping quite a beating.
Yes, they do. Yeah.
I do believe it's quite unfair. I've done I was working in industry, and I actually conducted 100 workshops with teachers looking at their learning environment design, and probably about 2,500 teachers went through those workshops. But that was an industry base, so there wasn't any decent research material, but a lot of anecdotal evidence. And what you see is a person who's very passionate about what they're doing, to desire to take a child and get them to grow, help them to grow and become more. And
that's why
they
we are
should be
all
protected
here.
In that space.
And that's why, Andrew, we are all here, joining these conversations every month. And because we are interested around the growth, of not just ourselves, but also as academics, as scholars, as teachers and researchers, we are interested, in, and we know we are transforming and changing the world and the people who are with us. And this is where Marco and Bibiana will be coming in and discussing what they're trying to achieve from their perspectives in today's talks. But before we kick off, what I'll do is I'll ask if Ursula might be able to maybe introduce very briefly the network, if you don't mind, and then I'll come back to Marco and Bibiana to kick off their presentations. But before we start, we have translators, and I will ask Ursula if she can then say this also in Spanish. But please be mindful that because we have a translation from English to Spanish, that you need to select in your Zoom bar interpretation channel. So there is two channels at the moment. There's English and Spanish, and it's important that you select the right channel and the reason is that if you do ask questions, then if you're not in the right channel, then the other people cannot hear actually what you're saying. They can't hear the interpretation. So it's quite important that you select either English or Spanish now. And I would like to thank to the interpreters. They have two interpreters who've been doing this for us for some time. So, thank you very much. And they will interpret from both ways. So if you would like to ask questions as we go, then do ask questions, in Spanish or English, and it'll be interpreted both ways. So it's fantastic. Ursula, would you mind just to say this also in Spanish, please?
Yes, thank you. Also, it's important that the speakers are in the right channel also for understand the questions, okay? Bueno, bienvenidos a todos. Yo voy a hacer mi introducción en castellano. A los que les comentamos antes de de empezar la sesión, que esta sesión se está traduciendo, va a ser traducida o interpretada simultáneamente del inglés al español o del español al inglés. La charla va a ser dictada en inglés, así que nuestras traductoras Estrella, Laura y Nancy lo van a traducir al castellano, y también para hacer preguntas a los speakers, ¿ya? Para seleccionar el canal deben ir a la barra inferior del Zoom y seleccionar el icono de globo y seleccionar el canal correcto, en este caso el castellano o el inglés. Okay. Well, I'm going to introduce the talk in Spanish today. ¿Ya? Buenos días a todos, buenos días, buenas tardes, buenas noches también a Andrew en Australia. Estoy muy feliz de darles la bienvenida a nuestra charla número 22, titulada Design Literacy in Action, de Marco Mazzarotto y Bibiana Serpa. Este mes de octubre cumplimos 2 años desde que Liv, Eric y yo decidimos reunirnos el primer martes de cada mes para compartir, discutir e intercambiar experiencias e ideas sobre la contribución del diseño a la educación general. Y este entusiasmo no es solo nuestro. Más de 30 académicos de diferentes partes del mundo han aceptado nuestra invitación, como hoy día Marco y Bibiana. Nuestra invitación a compartir sus conocimientos, sus investigaciones, pero también sus experiencias, sus dificultades y las motivaciones, porque estos elementos, las dificultades, las motivaciones, las experiencias, las percepciones, no aparecen en los artículos, pero son fundamentales para que los trabajos logren ser publicados y salgan a la luz. Para los que se están sumando a este ciclo de charlas hoy, quisiera contarles brevemente que Design Literacy International Network es una red de académicos e investigadores interesados en comprender, reflexionar y discutir acerca de la educación del diseño para el público general. A diferencia de la formación profesional, la alfabetización en diseño busca desarrollar habilidades para enfrentar y tomar decisiones en la vida cotidiana. Nos inspiramos en el enfoque crítico de Paulo Freire. Bajo esta perspectiva, alfabetizarse significa leer el mundo en toda su complejidad y participar con autonomía y autodeterminación para generar transformaciones sociales. Tenemos la convicción de que el diseño tiene la capacidad no solo de contribuir al mundo material, sino también a formar a los ciudadanos y consumidores responsables que estarán a cargo de diseñar el mundo del futuro. En nombre de Design Literacy International Network, quisiera darles la bienvenida a todos, agradecer a los autores y también a las personas que hacen posible estas charlas, especialmente a Pía Álvarez, Paulina Contreras de la Universidad del Desarrollo, a las traductoras Laura y Nancy y a Malin Tonder de Oslomet en la postproducción de los videos. Ahora los dejo con Marco y Bibiana, quienes harán una breve introducción de sus trayectorias y presentarán la charla Design Literacy in Action. Marco y Bibiana, the screen is yours.
Hi everyone. Bibiana, would you like to begin your presentation?
Okay. Hello everyone, it's very nice to be here with you. I'm Bibiana. I'm recently ended my doctorate here in Brazil, in the University of the State of Rio de Janeiro. And my practice as a designer is intertwined with my militancy in the feminist movement, and these two places, they integrate in my life in a very profound way, and I hope to share some thoughts with you on that today.
It's nice to be here with you, Bibiana. My name is Marco Mazzarotto. I am assistant professor here in Brazil, in the south of Brazil. It's because of that it's cold here right now. It's not so hot. I also work in an NGO called TETO, which works with community development in favelas, in slums here in Brazil. And I'm very interested in a more participatory and dialogical ways of design with these oppressed communities. And that's why Paulo Freire, this famous popular educator, is a very important reference for us. And I'm very happy to participate here in this conversation and to share our visions, our ideas about Paulo Freire and design. Let's begin. I will share my screen. I think Ursula already had the introduction of the theme of the conversation, so let's move for our motivation.
Me and Marco, we don't know each other in presence, like in real life. We just know each other online because we got together in a group of discussion of Paulo Freire. And because of that group, we then founded the Design and Oppression Network, which is a network that is running for 2 years now. We started in the beginning of the pandemic in 2012, sorry. 2000, I'm terrible with numbers. Okay, in the beginning of the pandemic. And right now we are developing a lot of different materials you can check out on our website. And one of these materials were this set of cards that we are presenting for you today. And we are very happy that these cards are being used by people in different places. And it's very nice to recover the contributions of Paulo Freire critical pedagogy for design in these cards. And in these cards, we use these dialogical and anti-oppressive approaches of Paulo Freire, trying to politicize design through his work. Your mic is closed, Marco.
Thank you, Bibiana. We'd like to emphasize the word recover, because it's not us who are inventing that participatory design in Freire have much in common. Even Peel N recognized the influence of Freire's ideas in the emergence of this approach in the 80s.
So this paper we wrote, it seeks to present an education material that we developed to assist in the critical reflection on design practices, seeking to unveil these political dimensions of design.
Why politicized design? We believe that politicized design or design practices in studies is to understand the power relations involved in the consequence of our design choices that can even reinforce oppressions or fight for liberation. Of course, it's not such a simple relationship. It's even likely that much of what we do is at both poles. It can either reinforce and fight for liberation, but we need to reflect on this and try our best to move away from the pole of oppression and become more and more close the pole of liberation.
And why use Freire's idea? We think that Freire brings two different things for us to talk about. There is the ontological, that is the why, and the epistemological, that's the how we design and why do we design. We think Freire can help us to think and reflect on that.
So a very quick introduction to Freire ontology. To Freire, as incomplete beings, our ontological vocation is to develop ourselves, to reach our full potentials, to live for ourselves and for our desires, dreams, and hopes. He used the term to be more, ser mais in Portuguese, to be more. And to be more, for this, we need to be free.
But he also points out that historical reality limits our vocation to be free. We are not free beings. Oppressed social groups have their freedom stolen and cannot live for themselves. Just as the oppressors, social groups are not free either, because they need to steal the lives of others. That's the relation of oppression and exploitation. Both are being less and are not free. This contradiction.
So this first part helps us to understand the reason for critical pedagogy of Freire, which is to unveil these oppressive relations and to fight against this and seek for liberation. So critical pedagogy seeks to unveil oppression at the same time that by praxis, the radical combination of critical reflection and action, we can achieve liberation.
This is a very nice photo of a cultural circle that happens in the city of Angicos. That was the starting point for Paulo Freire's methodology. And Freire applied his critical pedagogy to adult literacy. And this approach was a huge success, but with the military coup in Brazil, he was exiled and the approach was banned because of its political engagement.
So we try to bring this approach, this critical pedagogy in design. And why you need a critical pedagogy in design? To help unveil the political dimensions of what we create, understand when we reinforce oppression, and how we must fight to overcome them.
In the Freirean design ontology that we discuss in the paper, we point out that our vocation must be to create a world where everyone can be free to be more and to design their own realities. For that, we necessarily need to fight against oppressions, many created or reinforced by design processes, and design products.
So that is the why, the ontological reasons that we are discussing in the paper. Now let's move out to the epistemological approach. That's the how we can do that.
The Freirean epistemology, it is contradictory to seek an education for liberation if the educational processes are still oppressive. The same goes for design. In Freirean epistemology, knowledge cannot be imposed. It needs to be collective, horizontal, and dialogical construction.
And this is a very famous quote of Freire that tried to synthesize what Bibiana was saying. For Freire, liberation is not a gift, it's not a self-achievement, but a mutual process.
How we think about that in the design field. So a Freirean design epistemology. Design is always radically participatory and dialogical. There should be no hierarchy between designers and other participants, because everyone has not only the capacity, but the right to act to transform the world.
So coming closer to the idea of the cards, you can see that our actions as educators or as designers can act on both poles. They can be anti-dialogical, reinforcing oppressions, or dialogical, align themselves with struggle for liberation. And the cards that we presented to you right now, they work in the same way. They're cards that are anti-dialogical, and we think that cards represent oppressive relationships. And we have cards that try to bring dialogical approaches, reinforcing liberation. So we take a lot of Freire concepts. The anti-dialogical action and the dialogical action are Freire's approaches, Freire's ideas. Freire criticizes the anti-dialogical action and defends the use of a dialogical approach. In the left, we'll have a lot of tools, a lot of concepts that work in the anti-dialogical field. In the right, we have the I forgot the word, oppositive concepts. Unfortunately, because of the time, we don't have time to talk about all the concepts, but they are all explained in the paper. So read the paper if you are interested to know more about that. We just you talk about some of them just to give you an example of that.
This set of cards, they are an education material to support the study and the practice of design based on this Freirean critical pedagogy. This set of cards is composed by 16 reflection cards that can be used in multiple ways.
I don't know if I explain correct, but all these concepts that are listed here, which one become, we take each one, it put in a card to explain and to use this concept.
So there are 9 cards that have dialogical approaches that are shown in this slide. And there are 7 cards with anti-dialogical approaches that also are shown in the slide.
Here we have an example of two cards with opposite concepts. One is cultural evasion. Now, for Freire, cultural evasion is even with good intentions, it's the imposition of values, techniques, knowledge from the outside, replacing local culture and eliminating the creativity of the oppressed. The invading designers try to impose the invaded the correct way to be and to transform the world. In another hand, Freire defends the use of cultural synthesis, that it's the result of a dialogue between both oppressed communities and external design. It's not a cultural invasion, it's not to meeting yourself as a designer, but it's that collective construction that we have to make, we have to construct together to overcome oppression.
So far, we pointed out 3 ways to use the cards. The usage is not limited to these 3 ideas. Anyone is free to use as the cards. They are free to use the cards as they want. But we recommend this 3 usage because we already engage in the cards in that sense. The first is the mediation of discussions about experiences in design projects, reading the card and reflecting on what you have done in previous projects. 2, it serves as a glossary of critical pedagogy concepts, so we can engage with the concepts through the cards. And you can do a critical self-evaluation of your practice and design projects using the cards.
Well, so the conclusion of our presentation is whether you want it or not, political dimensions are part of design. And we believe that Paulo Freire's critical pedagogy in the cards we propose here can help to unveil these political dimensions. So you can make conscious decisions about what we create and avoid oppressive anti-dialogical practice and choosing to reinforce liberation for people to be able to be more.
You can download the cards for free, and you have a set of suggestive use and ways to engage with the cards and in your workspace or in your classroom. And we are starting a Designs of the Oppressed course, which is a course we teach in our network. It's starting next week.
Next week.
So yeah, so if you are interested, you can also check out in our website. Before we open to questions and answers, we would like to invite you to an activity using the cards. We selected 2 double cards that are opposed to each other, and we invited you to read these concepts and reflect on a design experience you had. And if you want, you can share with us what kind of thoughts the cards brings to you, and so we can reflect together on these concepts and reflect on our practice. So we invited you to read this concept and try to reflect on that.
Before we do this, Bibiana, would you mind? There's a question from Isabella. Isabella, would you like to ask your question, please?
Sure. I was
Thank
just
you.
wondering, and I'm sure this exercise will also be very helpful in answering my question, but I was just wondering if you had time to talk a little bit about, you know, a specific instance in which you introduced the cards to non-designers and how you ushered in using them, and then perhaps how you closed out that experience so that it, you know, actually it became something that was integrated perhaps in their lived experience. So I was just curious to hear a little more detail about like a specific case study if you can.
Okay. Marco, you like to share the experience with the law and design group?
Yeah, I don't know if I think that this concept is already in Europe too. I think it came from Europe. Something they calling right now like legal design, when people connect with lawyers, public services, trying to bring design. So they are not designers, but they're interested in using design to create laws and public politics, in public politics. So we use the cards with these persons. None of them were designers, and they are all very glad to use the cards, because these concepts are not from design field. These concepts is from Paulo Freire educational approach. So everyone can connect with them, even with experience that are not from design field. People remember from school, remember for practice of their everyday life, and they connecting with solidarity, with empathy, with dialogical leadership, anti-dialogical leadership. So it trying to bring these cards to design, but I think you can use that in every context.
I think also the cards have the potential to engage people in further research. Like they are the starting point of something that people could investigate further and try to reflect collectively on how that concept engages or not in the practice. I think in participatory practices, it's more revealing than one doing the reflection on its own, on his own, because you can stress points of view that are based on different experiences, even if you are design or if you are a designer or if you're just a participant in that experience of projecting something.
Great, thank you for that. I hope that that was very informative, Isabella, in regard to your question. I think let's go to the exercise then, Bibiana, and I just want to say that if you have any questions, do note them in a chat on the Zoom, and as we go, we'll address those questions. Bibiana?
Yeah. So going back to this proposed exercise, we would invite you to read, understanding that these cards, they represent the dialogical and the anti-dialogical approaches in the Paulo Freire theory, and they are opposite. So you can read as opposite and reflect on something of your practice as a designer or as a teacher of design, or your experience as a practitioner or a teacher.
I don't want to scuffle the exercise. Should we go through the exercise? And I have a question, and it's very much so based on what Mauricio has typed in a chat. But let's go through the exercise. Yeah. How would you like to proceed, Bibiana?
We can give people time to read the questions, the cards, sorry, and if they like to share, if no one would like to be exposed or anything, we have some examples of people who did the exercise with us in other contexts, and we can share.
So about 5 minutes?
Can be a little bit, 2 minutes, I think it's enough.
Okay, you make a call, okay?
While we're waiting, actually, this is Andrew Ford. I could actually share some of the work that I did before I began the PhD, which got me, I suppose, had the need now to do a PhD, is the idea of cultural synthesis. And as I mentioned before we got started, I ran some workshops for a manufacturer of furniture with teachers, and we did 100 workshops, 2,500 odd teachers, plus about 600 students or so, and of various ages. And this idea of both cultural invasion and cultural synthesis was one that came up early, because our first workshops did involve the hierarchy of the school, and we found that didn't get us a very good sense of teacher involvement, and so we, after a short while, we kicked out all the hierarchy, the school principal, the business managers, so the people with the money, the people who would normally control the decisions, were actually kicked out of the workshop, so that the teachers themselves would craft it. And it was basically a play-based experience where they drew and had used 3D models of furniture to create their own learning environments. And and we'd mix the people around to ensure that there wasn't a particular teacher who would have the strongest voice in a group, so that to try and achieve that synthesis, I believe. Just thought I'd share that, and back to other people now.
Thank you, Andrew. I would like to comment just one thing, that it's very nice for us to recognize the hierarchy that is set in the environment, not only by our presence as designer, but the hierarchy that already is happening in the group we engage with, because we have differences of gender, of race, or of class. These differences, they not vanish because we plan a horizontal environment. These differences, they
absolutely,
they permeate all group in the design processes. So this is something for us to keep in mind. That is not enough to put people in a circle. We have to to trace strategies, and it's very nice for you to share that experience and that recognition you and your team made in this project. So thank you, Andrew, for enlightening us with that experiences.
You're very welcome.
Anyone else who like to share? I think you could use the chat too if you don't like to speak.
I think Mauricio raised his hand.
Both of them. You may find out by my accent, I'm not Australian. I came from Chile, so I'm the same country Ursula is in. Chile and Brazil share a lot of common history. Yeah? We had dictators. You had Bolsonaro. We had something kind of similar in Chile before. I think the process of democratization of Chile went through a process of critical pedagogy. Basically, change didn't come out from the top. It came out from the time that people realized that there was this cultural invasion of the mind that paralyzed the country for a long time. And I still remember I was in Chile when everybody went to the streets, and actually all of us embraced and each other and actually create a human chain around Santiago, Chile. Basically, after that demonstration from the citizens of Santiago and in other main cities of the country, basically firearms didn't work anymore. So I'm personally very independent politically, but I think that is a demonstration of going against a mind invasion, an invasion of the mind, which is a cultural invention and acculturation from a neoliberalist approach. So that takes us to the point of empathy and solidarity. Empathy always, as a designer coming from the industry, I've realized that it's a little bit of a tricky business because of it's very easy to believe that you think what other people feel, but the solidarity of Freire actually talks about really feeling it to the point of moving to action. So it's very much an action work and influencing behavior change. So I wanted to share that, but I posted in there a couple of questions that are concerning design. And one is maybe for the people who are not part of Brazil or Chile, that we may be closer to Freire than other people in the other places of the planet. Three quick questions. One about contextualization, which is Chile, the same like Brazil, went through a process of modernism. You have Niemeyer in there. And also you have Guy von Serpa, very influential, coming from Germany. He influenced Chile as well. I had the fortune to meet him in a visit to Chile years ago. So the question is, how is that modernism affected the cultural synthesis and solidarity of Brazil that went through a dictatorship, but also the influence of modernism that has gone beyond dictatorship. The other thing is, how is that the role of the designer need to be redefined? Because according to Freire, the teacher is no longer God in comparison with the poor man or woman or child at the bottom. So whatever God says, the child needs to say yes to it. So how is that the role of the designer needs to be redefined? That could be a very interesting point that we can come out, kind of develop from these four cards. The other one that I forgot to
hold on. Mauricio, hold on. Just let's go with one, and I just, so can you just repeat your question, and then do the follow up if you don't mind.
Okay. The first question is the influence of modernism in Brazil, and how is that affected the process of critical pedagogy that was illuminating from the point of Freire. In my case, I was working with the Jesuits in Chile and applying theology of liberation in Chile, that at some point they're very close to each other. So modernism, critical pedagogy, building a nation out of dictatorship. And the other one is the redefinition of the designer under the critical pedagogy approach, because basically in Western society, we have the belief that designers are semi-gods.
Would you like to begin, Bibiana?
No, I already talked too much. I compliment you.
I think that's something that's important to point out, that cultural synthesis is not about throwing away everything. It's about the dialogical approach, to critical reflect about, I don't hate everything that came from Europe, that came from the United States. I look to that with a critical approach, and this thing is interest for us as Brazilian, as the oppressive group, this not. So when modernism came with ideas like a universal design, a design that everyone can use, that it's not you are not interested about that. but some ideas, yeah, we can use. So cultural synthesis about when two cultures encounter and something different came from that encounter. Some that came from dialogue. So I think that we have a lot to use from modernism, but not everything.
I would like also to point out that during the beginning of the dictatorship, we have this very powerful cultural movement that was called Tropicalia in Brazil, and it was influenced by modernism symbols, and it encountered different approaches of music, of visual language, and it turned it into something that was Brazilian. And so that's a good example for me of a cultural synthesis in the design field that is also connected to music, that is also connected to cultural expressions of people who were fighting the conservadorism of the dictatorship. And responding you about the place of the designer in this critical approach, we try to think, we stand in the middle of everybody is designer, because we understand that we have a set of knowledges that differentiate people who engage in design activities as a professional activity, and people who have the ability and creativity to make things. So we stand in the middle of understanding the potentialities of people and trying to engage with the very knowledge of Paulo Freire that everybody has something to teach and everybody has something to learn. So we engage in that approach in designing, trying to get the best out of the creativity and the experiences of different people's working together. And understanding that designers are not saviors of nobody, and we only can save each other together. Liberate each other together, as Freire talked in that quote.
Okay. So would you say that is a process of the designer as moderator and curator of the dynamic of liberation, instead of semigod dictating the solution? Or how would you name that for the designer?
I think the designer is a participant.
Okay.
Just another participant.
We can have tools, we can have dynamics, we can have all of that, but people also have their own way of doing things. We are not the only ones with a set of knowledge that organize the way we do things. So we need to be humble and understand that people have their own way of doing things, and we need to get in dialogue with that to formulate a third thing that is not our set of tools and is not a set of tools of people, but I think that can move the group forward.
Yeah, I think, sorry, go ahead, Marco.
No, and when we are a participant, just like anyone else, you can show your set of tools, but you have to listen the set of tools of the people, and the people would maybe choose your set of tools, or maybe use another, or maybe mix them, and then maybe you became a leader, or maybe not, but not just because you were a designer, you came to the group as a leader, because the group saw you as a leader, and that could not happen too.
So this actually takes us, is really interesting, because we're talking about tools, and there's Ursula, if you would not mind just asking a question, because she's describing she's asking about design process, and design process, it's a tool. in certain way. So Ushla, would you like to come in and ask your question?
Okay, thank you. Bueno, pienso que a mí me parece muy interesante esta manera de, este enfoque que ustedes plantean, como la síntesis cultural o la solidaridad en lugar de la empatía, etc. Y el llamado a generar diálogo. Pero en un proceso de diseño pienso que hay decisiones que son más acordes al diálogo, más abiertas o más adecuadas para el diálogo, y otras tal vez menos. Por ejemplo, decisiones técnicas que el diseñador debe tomar y que probablemente con mayor conocimiento de aspectos técnicos. Mi pregunta es si ustedes han explorado tipos de decisiones que son más adecuadas para, o más abiertas o más permeables para una aproximación desde el diálogo y otras menos. Esa es mi pregunta.
Do you want to go, Marco?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's me. Okay.
No, if you want, I can.
No.
Go
ahead.
We have not experienced the use of the cards in those kind of technical decisions in environments where we need to make technical decisions. But in previous experiences where we do not have the cards yet, but I was already thinking about this concept of Oliveira, and I was working with communities in the development of low-cost technologies for underprivileged communities. And surprisingly, there are some technical decisions that we should dialogue about because sometimes we engage in processes thinking that we already have the perfect technical solutions for that. And I think that prevent us to further discuss things. And that discussion can be a pedagogical one. Even if the decision in the end will be the one we have thought before, engaging in the dialogue and getting the group to get a consensus on that is a pedagogical path. So I think either way, the dialogue is necessary, not just to make the decision, but to make that process dialogical and pedagogical for everyone, so everyone can understand why and get a consensus on, yeah, that's the right decision. So either way, the dialogue is necessary.
Claro, y en ese sentido la decisión es compartida. ¿En qué se diferenciaría una aproximación como esa de otras como la co-creación?
I think that in the farm, if you are just seeing from outside, you could think that it's the same thing. But if we remember the ontological reasons, if you are using co-creation techniques to overcome oppression, probably you are aligned with Freire ideas. If you are just stealing the Freire ideas, and remember, Bibiana read Freire and use Freire ideas to inventing the participatory approach of the Scandinavians. If you're just stealing these techniques and use to create products that not align to the fight of oppression, so it's a very different thing. So I don't think it's much about techniques. It's more about intentions of why we're dialoguing. If I you are really interested in dialogical approaches.
Perfecto, la perspectiva finalmente.
And participatory approaches can also be extractive ones. We can engage in participation and actually exploiting people's creativity. So that's something co-design and participatory design is used for. We know that in most industries. So engaging with participation as a means for emancipation is different as the intention of extracting creativity and extracting knowledge from those people.
And this takes us to the last question from if I can ask I'm trying to the Camis. Would you mind to asking a question? Would you mind to come in, please? I'm not sure if that's the right name, but that's what it says on your account. It says iPhone de Camis. If not, then I can read this question. So it's more like a comment. It says here, designers are never working by themselves. Dialogue with others, technical or non-technical co-creators, help us to learn and understand other elements. Okay, other elements. Hold on, I've lost it now. You just got a message. Other elements and perspectives to consider, embrace complexity of dialogue process. And I say thank you, Marcos and Bibiana for the conversation. But I guess it's a comment about it's about the designers never work, by themselves. But if you think about in education, in design studios, it's mostly, it is the profs or the academics give briefs to students, and it's the profs, how the assessors, they are the clients, they are the users, they are the, they are the what was kind of described, they are these semi-gods, right? So in that sense, yes, in practice, you are told not to work, by yourself, but the way the designers are educated is very much so singular kind of a practice. And I'm not sure if you want to comment on this kind of what are the expectations that you have, Bibiana and Marco, of designers coming out and the way they're actually educated, in a day-to-day design studio.
Yeah, recently I was working on a comparison on reflective in action by Sean and critical pedagogy of Freire. And is mostly concerned on designing learning in studios and designing learning in struggles. Because once you ally yourself with social movements, with people constructing things for their own, you learn to consider things that are outside that hermetic place of the studio, where, as Eric said, we are all the subjects involved in the project. So I think Freire gives us concepts and tools to think about how designers can serve ourselves as designers, as people that want to be more, and serves people who are fighting for liberation, and not the market, not the industry, but how we can really relate to processes and products that are engaging with the liberation of people, with people's struggles, with fighting for popular power and not for capital power.
That's perfect, I think, ending, Bibiana. I think you have articulated very well. And I would like to invite you, everybody, to join us again next month. And it will be on Tuesday again, but it will be the second week of the Tuesday on 8th of November. We'll be joining with Oscar Huberta and Catalina Liola, and they'll be talking about, how they've been working with their companies to looking at the design literacies, beyond design studios, and I'm really looking forward to this talk. And it is in response to a legislation that has been enacted around sustainability. So I think it's going to be a really interesting talk. I would like to thank to Ursula for introducing the network, and I would like to thank to everybody for the questions, and especially to Marco and Bibiana to staying with us and having a really interesting conversation. And we hope all the best with your explorations, and we hope to have you again in the future. And I hope you'll be able to join the network and we can expand or together on what we've been doing. And Andrew, all the best with your PhD, and we hope to have you here in the future. Okay, so all the best, everybody. Enjoy your evening or your late morning, and we'll see you next month.
Thank you, Eric and Ursula, Liv, for the invitation. It's very nice.
Muchas gracias a todos. Bibiana, Marco,
Thanks,
todos por
Eric,
venir.
Ursula.
Y nos vemos el próximo mes. Un abrazo grande.
Un abrazo, Ursula.
Liv, todo bien.